I spent $7,000 on an intervention for my brother, and it blew up in my face. This is a message I recently got from one of our viewers. And this story is is pretty sad. It's pretty sad and it's totally avoidable. And this viewer even encouraged me to share this lesson with others because she doesn't want this to keep happening to other families. So, let me tell you just a tiny bit of background about the story, and then we're going to sort of dig through it, see if we can find the lessons here, and maybe even try to figure out what some other alternative options could have been. So, in this situation, this is a sister who had a brother who had an addiction to alcohol and marijuana. Now, the brother currently had a girlfriend who was pregnant at the time, and there were a couple of more siblings involved. I think it was a couple of more sisters. So it was like three girls and the boy. And the one sister was really worried about her brother. He had been fighting with his girlfriend quite a bit lately, and she knew that his drinking had been a problem, and she just basically didn't know what to do. So she tried to do some research online, and she came up with that the best idea was to have an intervention, like the TV show. If you've seen that, the kind where the interventionist comes out, they're trained professional, and they sort of walk the family through this process that essentially involves leveraging the addicted person into going to treatment. So she decided that's what she wanted to do. Now, once she found out the price tag, which was $7,000, which is a lot of money, because that's not the treatment, that's just the intervention part, trying to get the person to go to treatment. So keep that in mind because that's important. She was a little discouraged because she's like, how am I going to come up with $7,000? She had to figure that out. She finally was able to get all the money together. And so she hires this addiction interventionist to come and help them try to get the brother to go to treatment. So the interventionist comes and he's meeting with the family, which mostly includes the sister, the one that kind of initiated and that's the sister that reached out to me, the two other sisters, and the girlfriend of the brother. Now, I know a lot of you have seen the TV show, but there's a lot that happens in these types of interventions behind the scenes. These are actually called Johnson model interventions. And the family is really relying on this trained professional to be kind of like the coach and to give direction. Now, very commonly in a situation like this, the interventionist is going to walk the family through, okay, this isn't about beating up on this person. This is about saying we love you, but we're going to hold these boundaries. We're going to ask you to go to treatment, but we're going to hold these boundaries. And if you don't go, these are the consequences, basically. And in this situation, the interventionist basically told this family that even though the brother had been going to, I think, AA and seeing a counselor and actually had like 3 weeks sober already, the interventionist told this family that really wasn't going to be enough, that if a person was really going to get clean and sober, they needed to go to treatment. And so he encouraged them to pursue this intervention process and told them that if he didn't get sober, that he wasn't going to be safe to be around the family. And so he said, if he doesn't go to treatment, then you're going to have to hold the line, and you're going to have to stop being around him, and you're especially going to have to stop letting him be around your kids. So that's the sort of backstory to set the stage. So they have the intervention, they confront this guy, and the issue here is that a couple of things. I didn't know this at the time, but this is, something that was kind of revealed to me, was the brother's fairly stubborn person. But I think even more importantly than that, he had already had 3 weeks sober. So he's like, but I'm already sober. Like, I know I have a problem. I'm addressing it. Y'all are crazy. I don't need that. So he didn't end up going to treatment. Well, after that, the family, because they've been coached by the interventionist, and this is the way they do it typically, then they're going to hold those boundaries that they set. And in this case, the boundaries were basically like, we're pretty much like cutting you off, and we definitely aren't going to let you be around our kids, which were at the time like the nieces and nephews. But you got to remember, the girlfriend was pregnant too, and the girlfriend was going to hold this limit, even though the baby wasn't born. She was basically saying, hey, I'm not going to let you have visitation with this kid when it's born, and all this kind of stuff. So because he refused to go, these are the boundaries the family was going to set. And as you can imagine, when he didn't choose to go and the family set those boundaries, everything got a lot worse, right? Because the brother, even though he had been trying and he had gotten some sober time, now falls into like way worse depression. He's upset. Half the family won't talk to him. He's mad at the one sister who set up the intervention, because he's like, this is all your fault. You know, he felt like everybody ganged up on him behind his back and kind of had like this conspiracy against him. And so the whole thing was just a mess. So not only did he not go to treatment, but $7,000 was gone. And now the brother is more depressed. No one will talk to him. He can't see his nieces and nephews. He's afraid he's not ever going to be able to even meet his child. And things are worse. So let's maybe take a look at this situation and figure out how and why that happened, and what to do if you or someone you know ends up in a situation like this. Now, I will say that at the end of this message that I got from this viewer, they did say that they were currently using our invisible intervention process, which I'll tell you a little bit more about later, and that was working better, but that it had been a long struggle and difficulty digging out of this hole of this other type of intervention, the Johnson model intervention that they tried. And this person said, I really, really wished I would have known about that first. The problem is that most people don't know that there are any other options on how to intervene with an addicted loved one, but there are actually several options. And I want to tell you about those different options. And there's no one right answer. I just want to help you understand maybe like the pros and cons of the different options, so you can choose what is the right fit for your situation. And you got to kind of understand and see it through. An old recovery saying is play the tape, like think it all the way through those 5 steps, like I talk about what's going to happen, and then what's going to happen, and then what's going to happen, because it is going to be a process. Now, let's start with the type that this family used, which is called a Johnson model intervention. That is the most commonly known and used type of intervention. And I think it's really become popular because of the TV show. And so now most people understand what that is and what that means, and a little bit about how that works. Now, I will say this, the family, the sister in this situation, definitely made one wise choice, and that was to, if you are going to do a Johnson model intervention, you definitely want to hire a professional, because even though this sister is upset with professional, she didn't feel like it worked and this and that, you definitely don't want to try to do this willy-nilly on your own. And I do think a lot of people try that, like they like, I've seen the TV show, I know how this works, like I can do this. It's a very structured and planned out thing, and there's like plan A and plan B and plan C, and if this happens and this happens, there's a lot of behind the scenes that goes on. So just because you've seen the show doesn't mean that you're all ready and gung-ho to run in there and have a addiction intervention with someone, because those things can go bad in a minute. And even if they don't go bad, there is guaranteed to be a lot of drama and a lot of difficult moments. And so you definitely don't want to just sort of wing it. Okay. Don't do that. So the good thing is, when you're going to do a Johnson model intervention, you definitely want to hire an interventionist, which this person did. And I don't know what company she used, what person she used. I didn't ask. I don't know. I don't want to know. And, you know, I'm sure that there's other sides to this story, and I don't know those. So I'm just telling you this story based on the parts that I know, which is pretty much what I just shared with you. Okay. So the thing about a Johnson model intervention, I definitely think that this is a very useful technique. And you're going to want to use this type of intervention when things have reached a breaking point, okay? And you've tried other things and it's not working, and this person is about to lose everything, about to burn every bridge. They're probably unsafe, like imminently unsafe. Like I know anytime someone's like engage in addictive behavior, that there's an unsafe component, but like imminently, like I'm really afraid like they're going to die, if we don't do something very fast. That's the time that you want to do this, because it's a very, what's the word? Intrusive, big, elaborate thing to do. Invasive. It's kind of like they talk about medical procedures, and some are more invasive than others. This is about as invasive as you can get, okay, on the psychological side. And it does work in a lot of cases when the situation is right. I think that this works when you're dealing with somebody who is addicted to something, and they have some level of understanding that they're addicted to something. So they have to at least be in like the contemplative stage of change. And so they have to at least know that. Or sometimes you're dealing with somebody who's in an addiction, and it's just so bad, and they know it. They're not in denial about it, but they're just so out of control. Like they can't stop. So even though they know it and they acknowledge it, it's just far gone, and they can't get a handle on it. That's another good time when you want to use a Johnson model intervention. And the reason is because it's intense. It's relatively quick. It usually takes beginning to end probably somewhere between 3 days and a week. Like the actual intervention part lasts a few hours, but the behind the scenes, I'm including all that, and the lining up treatment, all that kind of stuff, is fairly quick. And you basically are giving this person, ultimately, everybody in their life is giving them this ultimatum to try to leverage them into treatment. And I don't have a problem with trying to help leverage someone to make a good decision for themselves. It's not so much that. If you're in that kind of situation and you're there and it's like, I could totally blow this up with this person and I know it could go bad, but this is like life or death and we got to do this or nothing else, then do the Johnson model intervention. Now they're pretty expensive. And you definitely need to hire somebody to come help you do this. But this is a method for you to use in certain situations. I have plenty of times recommended for families to go this route when I hear all the details. I think one of the biggest problems in this family situation is that this person, the brother, he already had 3 weeks sober. Now, there's a lot of other factors. We're going to talk about this. But in my mind, if I knew no other factors and a family had called me and said, like they're trying, they're like 3 weeks sober, but I don't think they really got it. And, it's really bad. What should we do? The thing of it is it is very, very, very difficult to get anyone to agree to go to inpatient residential 30, 60, 90-day treatment, which I didn't say this, but probably you already know this. But when you do that Johnson model intervention, that's the purpose, is we're trying to get you into like residential treatment, which is like 30, 60, 90 days treatment usually. So it's very difficult to get someone to do something like that. And I would have told you right off the bat that you're not going to get someone to do it who's already got 3 weeks sober, because in their mind, they're already sober and you guys are crazy and they're already doing it and y'all are just being ridiculous, right? And I think there's a little truth to that. Now, just because someone has 3 weeks sober, does it mean they don't need treatment? Does it mean they really get it? No, it really doesn't. But what it does mean is they're not going to be in a frame of mind to think that they need residential treatment, at least not any of the cases that I've worked with. And I get that you may think they need more than they have, and there may be some truth in that, but to say you need this highest level of care, even though you got 30 days sober, I just don't see that working. So if a family had told me this and they were asking, how should we intervene? I just would not have chosen this model for that reason alone. Now, just to add to that, on top of that, if you're not convinced already, if you've got 3 weeks sober already, then you probably don't even meet the admission criteria to get admitted into the treatment center. So it means even if you show your little self up there, at least in most of these cases, you have to meet criteria like, does it warrant this level of care? And if you've got 3 weeks sober, guess what? The insurance company isn't going to think that you meet the criteria for that level of care. So you could put yourself in treatment if you'd had that much sobriety. But I can tell you the insurance company isn't going to pay for it. So if you want to do it and you want to say, yes, we'll pay it, we'll pay out of pocket, they'll be like, sure, come on, you come on in. They don't care if you meet those insurance criteria. But There's something called the ASAM, Levels of Care Criteria. That stands for American Society of Addiction Medicine. And there's well outlined criteria about what kinds of situations call for what level of care. And it's going to be really hard to show, not impossible, but really hard to show someone's got that much sobriety needs the highest level of care, because they're kind of like already on the right track. Okay. So that's another thing that's a wall that this family quite possibly could have ran into. And like, let's just pretend, okay, they got the person to go, the place admitted them. Once they're in there for a couple of more weeks and they're sober a couple of more weeks, the way this works is if a person's in treatment, the treatment providers have to like call up the insurance companies or whoever's paying, and they have to say what's going on with the person to continue to get them to authorize the services. Basically, they're saying, yes, we'll pay for that person to be there. That's just how it works behind the scenes. And so if the person's had 3 weeks sober and they're doing great in treatment and they already got 2 weeks sober, then they're going to run out. They're not going to be considered medically necessary to be in that level of care. And the insurance company is going to say, drop them down anyway. So even if you got them in there, they're not likely to keep them in there very long because they have to meet criteria. So there's the psychological piece to me as to why this probably was the bad call to begin with. And then there's the sort of practical piece about like treatment and money and stuff like that. And in case you don't know, if you want to know about how much out of pocket cost, like a 30-day treatment cost, you're looking at probably an average of $30,000 upwards. So it's a lot of money. And most families can't afford to just pay that out of pocket. So that, I guess those are just important things to know. Now, that doesn't even take into consideration any of the other factors that come into play in this situation and in every situation. I think other factors that you got to consider are, what's the person's general personality like? Like, are they super duper stubborn-headed? Are they the type person that will dig in about anything just because you want to do something, they're just not going to do it? Like, that's just who they are. They've been like that since they're 5 years old, and you know that about this person. If you're dealing with that, then you need to think through, like, is this the way we want to go? Is this the route that we want to go? Because there's just a lot of pieces of this. There's a safety piece. And then another thing that you want to consider is, even when this works really well, and there's a lot of situations where it does work really well, the person who had the intervention done on them, let's say they go to treatment, they have successful treatment, they get sober. I have dealt with many clients whose families had these kind of interventions, and they feel pretty traumatized by it, because think about it, it's like if you walked into a room one day and pretty much everyone in your life, like all your family, your girlfriend, your best friends, like your teacher from college, whatever, everybody in your whole life is sitting in this circle, and they've all been talking about you behind your back, and then they all say all these really personal things out loud in front of everybody, and they sort of back you into a corner. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, okay? Like, if it's life or death, you do it. But I'm just helping you understand, like, the perspective from the person. That's very traumatizing. And a lot of times the person feels very betrayed. They feel humiliated, and it can take a long time to get over that. Like I said, if somebody's about to die, then that's okay. We'll deal with those repercussions later, but it is just something I just need you to understand when you make this choice, okay? I probably would not have advised this family to go that method, purely, if nothing else, from the fact that the 30-day sober. But this person who's already in an active stage of change, who's already trying to change, maybe they're not perfect, but they're doing a lot already, and that's pretty good. 3 weeks sober is pretty good. Like going to meetings and talking to a counselor, that's not nothing. And to say it's not enough, and now we're not talking to you, and now you can't even like come to your niece's birthday party, what do you think that's going to do, right? And the family has been instructed that once you set this limit, under no circumstances should you go back on the limit. And I do agree, when you're doing a Johnson model intervention and you set the limit, you need to hold the limit. But you got to decide, is that limit like really warranted here? And so in my mind, I want you to think about this. when it comes to setting these kind of limits with someone who has an addiction, it's not that you should never set these. It's just that a lot of times we set these boundaries of like, I'm not going to talk to you, or you can't be around the kids or whatever, because we feel like that's the consequence. That's the word we like to use, that we need to put in place to make this person choose to get better. Because we feel like if we don't do that, then we're enabling them. So we feel like we got to hold these limits to make this person get better. That is a bad idea. Alienating somebody is probably the worst thing for their addiction. Now, it doesn't mean you never do it. Here's when you do it. If this person really is unsafe and it really is causing you a ton of damage and it really is unsafe for them to be around the kids or whoever it is, then yeah, set that limit. But you set that limit for yourself or your family or the kids, not because you think this is what I got to do to force this person into doing or not doing something. Do you understand the difference? Like, because yes, doing it for yourself, that's a good reason, but doing it because you're trying to punish or force this consequence, it just doesn't work. Number one, it's a bad plan, and it's just hard on everybody. So think that through. Now, another kind of intervention that you could consider is something called, this is getting a lot more popular lately. It's called an arize intervention. And this is a different type of intervention. It's also pretty expensive, but it has a whole different way of going about things. Basically, the person is included. So you're not like going behind their back. You're not like surprising them. You're not trying to force. You're basically trying to get them to partner up and team up with you and help be a part of the team of conquering the problem, which I do think is a step in the right direction. Okay. So the way that works is the family, you also have to have a trained person to help you through this. We'll say, hey, to the addicted person, we'll say, hey, we're concerned about your drinking or whatever it is. And we're all going to meet as a family and we're going to try to figure out, we're going to talk about this issue. We want you to be involved with that. So this is the time and place of the meeting or the virtual meeting, Zoom call or whatever it is. We really want you to be there. We love you, whatever. So it's kind of like you're inviting them, you're including them in the process. There's a lot of work that goes into trying to help the person feel less shameful and guilty about it. Like they do a lot of like genealogy work, family history work. Everybody in the family works on their part, which I definitely think that this is a huge step in the right direction in a lot of ways. So that is another type of intervention that you can consider. The third type of intervention process is the one that I advocate most commonly, and that's the one that that we teach, like in our invisible intervention process. We use a combination of some techniques that have been researched and proven and that work, and even from our own experience, it definitely works better. And though the main pieces of that would be the CRAFT method, that stands for community reinforcement and family training. And we also, in the invisible intervention, we teach something called motivational interviewing, which is a set of communication techniques to help draw someone's motivation out. And there's some other pieces that go into our particular process, but essentially what goes on here is this is a behind the scenes thing where it's usually like the spouse or the parent or someone that like lives with the person who's like the closest person is trying to make the home and family environment more conducive to recovery. And there's several things that get involved in this. You got to get out of the bad guy role. You do a lot of positive reinforcement for steps in the right direction. You hold boundaries, healthy boundaries. There's definitely that component to it. But basically, it's about shifting the person's thinking, shifting the person's environment so that they come to the idea of themselves like, hey, this isn't serving me well anymore. I need to do something about it. And so it helps them to get out of denial and into recovery. Now, this process does take a while. Like you're not going to do this for a week and this person admit themselves into treatment. I mean, it has happened, but it's not likely to happen. However, when you go about this way, number one, probably within a week, the relationship will be better. So you will see some improvement within a week. It's not like the person's like checking themselves in somewhere in a week, but you will see some improvement in the relationship dynamics almost immediately. And you're helping this person come to understand what is going on with them differently. And so when they do choose to get help, whether that's to go to like 30-day treatment or intensive outpatient or whatever that help is they choose to get, they're actually going to be in a readiness for change. They're going to be in an active stage of change. They're going to get it. They're going to have a much better level of insight, which means the treatment is much more likely to work. The way I refer to this is it's like tilling the ground before you put the seed in. So yeah, it takes a little longer, right? But it's number one, a lot cheaper, like a lot, a lot. And it's more likely to stick. And not only that, but you're also helping change the family at the same time. So everybody's getting better. And it's something that can keep going even after the treatment process or whatever. So I just think that there are a lot of positive reasons to use this method. I think this is the best method, unless we are in a serious time crunch issue and something bad is about to happen. Then you probably don't need to use that method. You probably do need to do something more direct, like a Johnson model intervention. So it's not that all these different interventions, they definitely do have their place. You just sort of need to think it through. The arize intervention would probably be in the middle between the Johnson model and then just the pure craft method. So there are different options, and you got to understand your family situation to figure out what's best for you. Another situation where the craft method might not be is like, if you're so angry at this person, like you can't positively reinforce them and you're just done and you cannot take it long enough, then the craft method isn't going to be for you, because that's going to require you to sort of stay in the game and be strategic and make some changes in how you interact with this person. And that takes some willpower and some strength. And sometimes you're just done and you don't have it, and that's okay too. So I just want you to know and think through this, because this poor family that I'm telling you about, they've spent $7,000 and the situation's worse. And then this poor sister, who's pretty much the one that paid the most money, like everybody's mad at her. The siblings are mad at her. The brother's mad at her. Like it just sort of backfired. And I feel terrible for everybody involved. Now, I do think, like I said, that this situation has turned around. The sister decided to be in the invisible intervention, is using some of the craft techniques, and it's turning around. But man, it has been a long process. What kinds of experiences have you guys had with interventions? Have you had an intervention done on you? Have you done an intervention? Have you tried to do different things? What's worked? What hasn't worked? What do you guys think about this? All right, if you're watching live, I am going to try to come through here and respond to some of your questions. If you're watching on the replay, definitely join in the discussion, because I always go back and read the comments later. Let's see here. We have a comment. The entire addiction recovery industry is just snake oil. Go to an AA meeting. I'm not going to agree with you here completely. I don't really think the entire addiction recovery industry is snake oil. I definitely think it's got some broken pieces, but it's not for this evil reason. In fact, the video I have for you that's going to be coming out for you next week is all about the behind the scenes of addiction treatment. So that might be one that you might be interested in seeing, sort of understanding how that works on the behind the scenes level. Keep your eye out for that. I think it comes out Tuesday. Sunny Pie says, I understand why it'd be expensive, but it's desperation, maybe. Yeah, it's desperation. Yeah. You do get to a point where you don't know what else to do. And the sister that did this, she's a loving person. She's doing this from the best thing she knows how to do. And that's why I just wanted to tell you about this, because that's the only thing most people know how to do. It's the only way, because it's the only one you've seen the TV show about. So it's like, oh, that's what you do. That's how you intervene. But like I said, you got to think it through. It's complicated. All right. David said, where I worked, you had to show up drunk to be admitted. I know, right, David? Because if you're like walking in sober, this is ridiculous. I know, but if you're walking in sober, the treatment facility might think like, dude, you're already sober. What you doing here? They don't really say that. I'm exaggerating a bit here, but there's some truth in what David is saying. Like if you don't even have like alcohol in your urine from like yesterday or the day before, then probably they're going to say, do you meet inpatient criteria? That's a real thing. And if you're too drunk, then you might be over the limit and they might not admit you then too. They might send you to the hospital first. So it's like this little window you got to get in to make it work. It's crazy, I know. Let's see here. David says, what about the trauma the family has endured being on the receiving end of the person's SUD? Yes, David, that's a huge question. This whole channel talks about that. We have hundreds of videos on that. I feel you 100%. I'm there for you. Agree 1,000,000 times. Yes. Sunny Pie says, what is an SUD? That's just like the fancy clinical term, Sunny Pie. It means substance use disorder. And I usually use the words addict and alcoholic. It upsets everybody on here, but I don't care. I have reasons. I've got other videos on why I use those words, but that's just the fancy, like clinical, official, like what would go in your medical chart term. Yes. Let's see here. Christine says, I would hate being ganged up on like that. Yeah, I think pretty much anyone would. It wouldn't be, like I said, I would do it, but it would be like, I would look at the other options first to see if there's something else that could be done. Sometimes that's what you got to do, though. Anthony says, my experience with this is the more people tried to force me, the more I did the opposite. Yeah, Anthony, you're probably one of those stubborn-headed people, right? And a lot of us are. Like, no one likes to be forced into something. And what happens is when people force, even if we agree to go and we do it in our head, we still feel defensive. And that defensiveness and that upsetness against family is a block from even letting the treatment sink in, because all you're thinking while you're sitting there for 30 days, I can't believe they did this. This stupid, they're being ridiculous. But you're just like going through the process and you're like checking the boxes or whatever so you can get out. Sylvia says, what can you do if your healthy boundaries make your loved one with an addiction worse? I think that there are definitely cases where the family setting healthy boundaries probably isn't going to help anything with the addicted person. But the reason that you set the healthy boundaries, Sylvia, is for you, not necessarily for the person. Like, for example, the healthy boundary might be, I can't have you living here. I am cutting you off. I am cutting ties, because if I don't, I'm going to drown with you. I agree that it probably isn't great for the addicted person, but sometimes you have to do that for yourself. So yes, you get in that situation from time to time. Debbie says, my husband has decided to only drink on weekends. He's angry that I'm not super positive and excited about this. His normal weekend is 15 to 18 beers, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I want his personality back. All right, Debbie, I've talked about this on other videos, so I'm going to give you the quick version. But I will encourage you to check out my playlist on the stages of change. But here's what I'm going to tell you. This probably isn't going to work for your husband, but this is one of the things that almost everyone tries. And what I encourage you to do is be positive about it. Even though you know it's not going to work, because what I want you to be positive about is I want you to be glad that he is trying to make it better and that he is taking steps to do that. And if you can do that, I know that seems unfair, but if you can do that and then sort of let him try his method, and then if it doesn't work, which it probably really won't, because what will happen is like the line will get blurred, it'll be like, well, Friday's a holiday, so it's going to start on Thursday. The line will sort of gradually inch back to where it was, but you got to let the person figure out that, yeah, that plan doesn't work. I call that bargaining, and I talk about it a lot in the stages of change videos. So check those out, and that might help you figure out and feel maybe even a little bit better about where he's at and what's going to happen next. Julie says, my addicted loved one says he wants to get sober, but continuously relapses every 3 weeks or so. Is he just struggling or manipulating me? No, if he is like getting 3 weeks sober, he's serious. If he was just manipulating you, he would just say that to you, but he wouldn't get any sober time. For someone to get 3 weeks sober, they're really trying hard. Now, there may be something that's missing or something else they need to do, but I doubt that that's just pure manipulation, because it's really hard to get 3 weeks sober. So they're definitely trying if they really are sober for that length of time. All right. Bob says trial and error. Yeah, sobriety is kind of a trial and error process. No matter how someone gets to it or gets to treatment, there's going to be some trial and error, and it's frustrating, and we get impatient, but it's our impatience sometimes that can make things worse and can actually slow things down. You've got to be strategic. You guys know that's what this channel is all about. My goal is to keep you 5 steps ahead of addiction. You got to think it through, what's coming next, and then what will happen, and then what will happen, and you got to have a plan for those things. That's how you get out of this thing as a person with an addiction, or as the family trying to help someone with an addiction. Susan says, let's see. Oh, Amber, thank you so much for all the information and care you provide. Thank you, Susan. I really appreciate your feedback and all of your guys' support, your likes, your comments, your shares. It helps tremendously. It goes a long, long way. Now, in the description, I did put the link for you about the invisible intervention if you want to learn more. And up next, I want you to watch this set of videos about how to motivate someone to go to treatment, because if you follow these steps, they will get you further than some of the other things we talked about today. All right, everybody. See you next time.